What if I told you that after 32 years of marriage, I discovered my husband had been keeping his childhood sweetheart's photo in his wallet the entire time? What if I told you that when she became ill, he brought her into our home and expected me to become her caregiver? And what if I told you that when I finally said, enough, my own son called me selfish and told me it was my job to sacrifice my happiness for the family? This is the story of how I learned that sometimes, walking away is the bravest thing you can do. Before we dive into this story, I want to know, where are you watching from today? Drop a comment and let me know your city or country. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. My name is Elena, and at 63 years old, I thought I had my life figured out. I'd been married to David for over 3 decades, raised our son Michael, and spent my days maintaining the perfect home. I cooked elaborate meals, kept every surface spotless, managed all the household finances, and never complained when David worked late or forgot our anniversary for the 5th year running. I told myself this was love. This was what good wives did. But everything changed the day David came home with tears in his eyes, clutching his phone like it held his entire world. "Elena," he said, his voice shaking, "Sarah is sick. Really sick. She has no one else." Sarah. His high school girlfriend. The woman whose name still made his eyes light up after all these years, though he'd never admitted it. The woman I'd always felt like I was competing against, even though she lived 3 states away and we'd built an entire life together. "What do you mean she has no one?" I asked, though part of me already dreaded the answer. "Her family is gone. She's been diagnosed with early onset dementia, and she can't live alone anymore." "Elena, I know this is a lot to ask, but I think we should bring her here. Just until we can find her proper care. Just until." Those words echoed in my head as I stared at my husband of 32 years. The man who had never once brought me flowers, just because. The man who had never learned how I liked my coffee despite watching me make it the same way every morning for decades. The man who was now asking me to open our home to the woman who had held his heart first. "David, I don't think that's." "She's sick, Margaret. What kind of people would we be if we turned our backs on her now?" And there it was. The guilt. The implication that saying no would make me heartless, selfish, unkind. So I did what I'd always done. I swallowed my discomfort and nodded. Sarah arrived on a Tuesday. She was still beautiful in that effortless way some women just possess. Even with her illness, there was something luminous about her that made me feel invisible in my own home. David's face when he saw her for the first time in 20 years. I'll never forget that expression. It was like watching someone remember who they used to be. Within days, our house transformed. David, who had never shown interest in decorating, suddenly cared about fresh flowers in every room. He bought new curtains for the guest room, Sarah's room, and made sure her favorite tea was always stocked. He sang old songs while he helped her with tasks, songs I'd never heard him hum in all our years together. Meanwhile, I became the invisible caregiver. David worked his regular hours, leaving me to manage Sarah's increasingly difficult behavior. She would hide my jewelry and claim I'd stolen it from her. She poured dish soap in my coffee one morning while glaring at me with suspicion. When I tried to help her shower, she accused me of trying to hurt her and screamed until David came running, but only to comfort her, never to ask what had happened to me. "She's confused," he'd say whenever I tried to explain. "She doesn't understand that you're trying to help. Just be patient with her, Elena. She's been through so much." Patient. Always patient. Never mind that I was exhausted from staying up all night when she wandered the house. Never mind that I couldn't leave her alone, which meant my entire world shrank to the 4 walls of our home. Never mind that watching my husband tenderly brush her hair each evening while he'd never done the same for me was breaking something inside my chest. The breaking point came 6 months later, during what should have been a celebration. Our son Michael had gotten a promotion, and I'd spent all day preparing his favorite meal, lasagna with homemade pasta, garlic bread, and tiramisu for dessert. I'd set the table with our good china, lit candles, and even bought a bottle of champagne. When Michael arrived with his wife Jennifer and their 8-year-old daughter Emma, I felt a rare moment of joy. This was what I lived for, family gathered around our table, everyone I loved in one place. But 20 minutes before dinner, Sarah had what David called an episode. She became convinced that I was poisoning everyone and swept her arm across the counter, sending the entire lasagna crashing to the floor. Cheese and sauce splattered everywhere, mixing with shattered pieces of my grandmother's casserole dish. I stood there, staring at hours of work destroyed, while Sarah retreated to the living room and David followed to comfort her. "Mom, what happened?" Michael asked, stepping carefully around the mess. "Sarah had a bad moment," I said quietly, grabbing paper towels. "I'll clean this up and order pizza." That's when I heard it. David's voice from the living room, soft and tender. "It's okay, sweetheart. Elena understands. She knows you didn't mean it. Come here, let me hold you until you feel better." Sweetheart. In all our years of marriage, he'd never called me sweetheart. Michael saw my face and immediately stepped forward. "Mom, let me help clean." "No," I said, louder than I intended. "No, I've got it. This is what I do, right? Clean up everyone else's messes." Michael frowned. "Mom, that's not fair. Sarah is sick. Dad's just trying to." "Your father is trying to what, exactly?" I interrupted, something inside me finally snapping. "Take care of the woman he should have married instead of me." "Elena." David appeared in the doorway, his face stern. "That's enough. Sarah is a guest in our home, and she's ill. I expect you to treat her with compassion." "A guest?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "David, guests leave. Sarah has been here 6 months, and you've made it clear she's staying. I'm not a guest, I'm the maid you don't have to pay." My granddaughter Emma was watching from behind her father with wide eyes. Jennifer was trying to distract her, but the damage was done. Our family dinner was ruined, just like everything else in our lives. Michael stepped between us, his voice tight. "Mom, I think you need to calm down. Everyone's stressed, but taking it out on a sick woman isn't going to solve anything." "Taking it out on her?" I stared at my son, this man I'd raised, and felt something die inside me. "Michael, I haven't taken anything out on anyone. I've cleaned up after her, cooked special meals for her dietary restrictions, given up my entire life to care for her. And your response is to tell me to calm down? Well, what did you expect?" Michael shot back. "You're home all day anyway. Dad works full-time, and Sarah needs constant supervision. It makes sense for you to handle the day-to-day care. Home all day." As if managing a household, caring for a dementia patient, and maintaining everyone else's life was somehow equivalent to relaxing. As if my time, my energy, my entire existence had no value beyond what I could provide for others. "You know what?" I said quietly, setting down the paper towels. "You're right. I am home all day. But starting tomorrow, I won't be." I walked to our bedroom, pulled out the suitcase I hadn't used since our honeymoon, and began packing. David followed, his voice alternating between anger and pleading. "Elena, you're being ridiculous. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? You haven't worked in years." I folded my clothes methodically, surprised by how calm I felt. "I'm going to live, David. For the first time in decades, I'm going to live for myself." "And what about Sarah? What about me?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the man I'd fallen in love with, but a stranger who had taken my devotion for granted for so long that he'd forgotten I was a person with my own needs and dreams. "What about me, David?" In all these months, in all these years, when have you ever asked what about me? He had no answer. I moved in with my sister Linda temporarily, and within a week, David was calling constantly. Not to apologize, not to ask how I was doing, but to complain about how hard everything was without me. Sarah burned the kitchen towels trying to make toast, he'd say. She won't eat the meals I prepare. She keeps asking for you. Then hire a professional caregiver, I'd reply. We can't afford that kind of full-time care. Then place her in a memory care facility. I could never do that to her. But he could do it to me. He could expect me to sacrifice my health, my sanity, my entire identity without question. Michael called too, his tone a mixture of frustration and guilt. Mom, Dad's falling apart. He's lost 15 pounds, and he looks terrible. Sarah's condition is getting worse, and he can't handle her alone. When are you coming home? I am home, I told him. You know what I mean. When are you coming back to take care of your responsibilities? My responsibilities? I almost laughed. Michael, my responsibility is to myself now. I raised you, I supported your father's career, I maintained our home for over 30 years. I fulfilled my responsibilities. Now it's time for everyone else to fulfill theirs. The months that followed were the hardest of my life, and also the most liberating. I got a part-time job at a local bookstore, something I'd always dreamed of doing. I took art classes at the community center. I read novels without interruption. I rediscovered who Elena was when she wasn't defined by what she could do for other people. David hired and fired 3 professional caregivers in 2 months. According to Michael, Sarah's condition had deteriorated rapidly, and she'd become violent with strangers. The house was in chaos, bills were piling up, and David was having what Jennifer diplomatically called a breakdown. He needs you, Michael pleaded during one of our weekly coffee meetings. Whatever issues you two have, can't you put them aside for now? I stirred my latte slowly, watching the foam swirl. Michael, let me ask you something. If Jennifer became ill tomorrow, would you expect Emma to drop out of school to care for her? Would you ask an 8-year-old to sacrifice her childhood, her education, her future? Of course not. That's ridiculous. Then why is it reasonable to ask me to sacrifice the rest of my life? He had no answer for that either. The call came on a Thursday evening. David, sobbing into the phone, could barely form words. Elena, please. Sarah's in the hospital. She attacked me with a kitchen knife. She didn't know who I was. The doctors say we can't bring her home anymore. She needs specialized care. I felt a stab of sympathy, not for David, but for Sarah, lost in the maze of her own mind, frightened and confused. I'm sorry to hear that, I said gently. I hope you find a good facility for her. Elena, I was wrong. About everything. I know that now. Would you consider coming back? I can't do this alone. I looked around Linda's guest room, which had become my sanctuary. My art supplies were scattered across the desk. A half-finished painting of a sunrise hung on the easel, the first creative work I'd done in decades. Books I'd chosen for myself were stacked on the nightstand. David, I said quietly, I spent 32 years of my marriage alone. I think you'll manage. 6 months later, I signed the divorce papers. David fought it initially, convinced I'd come to my senses, but eventually realized I was serious. The settlement gave me enough to buy a small condo and maintain my independence. Michael was furious. Mom, I don't understand you anymore. Dad made mistakes, but he's sorry. Isn't that worth anything? Don't you believe in forgiveness? I forgive your father, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean returning to a situation that was slowly killing me. What about family loyalty? What about, for better or worse? I smiled sadly. Michael, I kept my vows for 32 years through better and worse. But I never vowed to become invisible. I never vowed to lose myself completely. 2 years have passed since I walked away from my old life. David remarried, not Sarah, who passed away peacefully in memory care 8 months after our divorce, but a widow from his office who, according to Michael, understands his needs. I understand now that I was never competing with Sarah. I was competing with David's fantasy of who he thought he was supposed to be. The devoted friend, the noble caregiver, the man who would sacrifice anything for love. He just never realized he was sacrificing me. Michael and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship. He's begun to understand, especially after watching Jennifer go through postpartum depression and seeing how much support she needed. He's started to recognize that caregiving is real work, that emotional labor has value, and that his mother was a person deserving of consideration. Last month, he brought Emma to visit my condo. She loved my art studio and asked if I could teach her to paint. "Grandma," she said while mixing colors on her palette, "you seem happier than before." "I am happier, sweetheart." "Why?" I thought about how to explain it to an 8-year-old. "Because I remembered that I matter too." She nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to her. At 65, I'm living alone for the first time in my adult life, and it's wonderful. I paint in the mornings, work at the bookstore in the afternoons, and spend my evenings however I choose. I've joined a hiking group and made friends who knew me as Elena first, not as someone's wife or mother or caregiver. Some people call what I did selfish. They say I abandoned my duty, my vows, my family when they needed me most. They say I should have been more understanding, more patient, more forgiving. To them, I say, I spent 32 years understanding everyone except myself. I was patient with everyone except the woman in the mirror. I forgave everyone except the person who needed my forgiveness most, me, for accepting so little for so long. I don't hate David. I don't even regret our marriage entirely. It gave me Michael, and it taught me valuable lessons about love, sacrifice, and ultimately, about knowing when enough is enough. But I refuse to apologize for saving my own life. The woman who put everyone else's needs before her own is gone. In her place is someone who knows that self-respect isn't selfish, that boundaries aren't cruel, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone else's inability to grow. I am 65 years old, and I am finally free. That's Elena's story, and I hope it resonates with some of you watching today. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue sharing these important stories. More importantly, I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between everyone else's expectations and your own well-being? How did you handle it? What would you tell Elena if you could sit down and have coffee with her? And if you have your own story that you'd like to see shared on our channel, don't hesitate to reach out. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is realize we're not alone in our struggles. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Remember to hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads, and please share this video with someone who might need to hear Elena's message. It's never too late to choose yourself. Until next time, take care of yourselves, because you matter too.